Okay, so we're going to talk about Medivac. I'm going to wait.
Have we got? I think we've run out of time.
Actual political conversation. Where we're at now is this New Zealand deal, and the previous debate was all about this lifetime visa ban. So would Labor agree to that if it applies to New Zealand but applies to every single visa category? This was the sort of sticking point last time.
Well, I think the reality is there is still a lot of secret deals and secret agreements. I don't even think Jason knows where the government's current position on resettlement of refugees is up to. So I think it's pretty unreasonable to be asking those on the Labor side to give assurances.
For the record, I think that's quite a reasonable question.
What's that?
Asking them what the secret deal was.
So you tell us what you tell us what the secret deal was.
No, I agree that you should ask him questions about it. You should ask Labor about it.
Well, I can't answer because my answers was also
No,
secret.
I'm agreeing that your question was fair.
Oh, okay, great. Thanks for that.
No problem.
So, but Labor's part. If we get picky about this, and Labor says we're going to hold it up because these people might need to visit Australia on a business trip in 20 years. I mean, it's been going on for that many years. Don't you just say, look, we'll pass it and they can resettle?
Well, what we've seen this week is that Medivac, which was working, which was giving treatment for sick people, was repealed. That was a bad policy decision. So I don't have much faith that anything that this government negotiates at the moment is going to take us back in the direction of treating sick people and people who are currently stuck in detention overseas, treat them well. I would like to see the New Zealand deal, a reasonable New Zealand deal, taken up. But I don't think there's been ministerial delegations to New Zealand to try and actually put this together.
Well, the offer's still on the table, so they don't.
Well, it's still on the table for New Zealand.
But this does also put in concrete what your old boss brought in, that no one will be resettled. Kevin Rudd, I should point out, no one will be resettled in Australia ever that arrived after July. So the government's just saying, let's formalise that.
But you have to resettle people. The other part of that is you say no one will be resettled.
But this helps them get resettled. They pass this, and the government will then progress with the New Zealand deal.
Well, I don't have much faith the government will actually progress with the New Zealand deal. They've had 6 years to start to pull things together, and they haven't.
To you on this, so if the US deal is already happening, people are already resettling. Clearly, there's not a risk that just because they haven't been deemed they can't resettle for life, they're going to come here. Otherwise, the government is increasing that risk. So you can limit this to New Zealand, surely.
How do you mean?
The lifetime visa ban can be limited to people being resettled in New Zealand.
Sure, it can be limited to whatever group of people you'd like to limit to. I mean, legislatively, you can do that pretty easily.
But that'd be a logical thing to do, wouldn't it?
Well, if you're worried about people using New Zealand as a backdoor, which then undermines the credibility of our border security and immigration system and humanitarian system, then, that's something you would do to make sure that people don't start to abuse the system that we've set up.
Why does the government push back then and say they won't just make it New Zealand, they want to make it everybody?
Well, I suspect the reason for that is that when people resettle in the United States, because of the distance involved, they're not that likely to then move from the United States to Australia. But I think the other reason for it is that way back under the Howard government, there were a number of people resettled in New Zealand. When that occurred, they were then able to use the family reunion provisions of the New Zealand Immigration Act to allow up to, I think it was 750 people, but then the Department of Immigration in New Zealand admitted that they'd lost actual, capacity to track who was there.
Isn't that again another argument to make sure it applies to the New Zealand cohort?
Well, yeah, I guess that would be an argument.
So you think the government should go and talk to Labor about this? Because so far that seems to be the stalemate.
Well, no, I think that at the moment the important thing is that we keep the integrity of the system that we've got in place, that's worked well, in place, and not go and start fiddling around with it, because that's what happened when Kevin Rudd, or the Rudd government per se, decided that we can soften this around the edges, and of course before we knew it we had 51,000 people behind bars or in detention centres.
But from your initial comments, you'd be open to a New Zealand cohort only lifetime visa ban?
Look, I mean, as you know, I'm the son of a migrant. My view has always been that we need to balance our humanitarian obligations as human beings and as a nation against the integrity of the system, because if you don't have integrity in the system, you end up with people dying at sea, and that's inhumane. So the key for what we're doing is, and if we're going to err in one direction, it should be in the integrity of the system, because what we saw with numerous experiments that were tried previously was that when you create chinks in that integrity, then actually what you create is a system that doesn't assist or help refugees trying to come to Australia, and you make their lot worse off.
You agree with that?
Well, just before we're going to talk about compassion, we're going to talk about treating people fairly. This government, your government today, closed down debate on the foreign aid bill that was before the parliament. It could have been debated and probably passed today. It had bipartisan support. You cut aid to Pakistan. You have done a terrible job in managing the broader global challenges on this. I just think when the government and any government member, including Jason, who I think is at the more decent end of the spectrum, talks about preventing people movements and helping in a humanitarian way, you've actually got to look at the $11.8 billion they've cut from the aid budget. These things are related. So I just find the...
when can you get more generous on aid? Because the budget's back in surplus.
Well, I'm on the record as saying that I think we need to rebuild our aid budget.
Should that start in the next budget?
yes, it should.
Well, it should start as soon as we possibly can.
Well,
their
hang on,
judgments.
but what does that mean?
That means their judgments for people like the Treasurer and the Prime Minister.
what's
The Treasurer and the Prime Minister who cut the
What's
aid...
your view as someone in the Liberal Party who can speak out as a backbencher?
Thank you for that, Tom. My view is that I don't think we're at that point yet, but it is
Next
something...
budget, that point?
Well, when I see the parameters of the next budget, yeah, I think that's something that we should look at.
But what does that mean then? If it's a healthy surplus, then we can?
I think that if our trajectory continues the way that it's continuing at the moment, that there is room for increases in foreign aid. However, everyone is after more money, from aged care to health to pensions.
True.
So, all these things need to get balanced. But the point, yes, okay.
We've got a heart out.
I thought we get to do the heart out at the end of the year. Don't we get to do it?
Yeah,
you promised.
Can you throw to the break?
All right.
Look down the barrel of the camera there.
All right, well...
Okay, I'm going to...
I thought we were going to do it together. Can't we look down this barrel?
No. Sorry,
All right,
Pat. Over
well, that's the end of Linsky Gorman with our special guest, Tom Connell. We are now going to go to the break and we'll be back with Newsday.
Well done, Tom.